That's what I mean. Folks, we're going to try a little something different this morning, which is an a cappella chant with some a cappella, right? This is a cappella,
yes,
no harmonic.
No.
A cappella chant with some drum. And this is it is a Hebrew chant, I think that was written right after 9/11, if I'm not mistaken, by a rabbi. I don't know how do you pronounce the title of this?
Olam Hesed Yiboneh.
Olam Hesed Yiboneh, I will build this world from love. So Melissa's going to start singing it, and here are the words, and I just encourage you to join in. We're just going to kind of keep doing it until we look at each other and stop. It is Contemplative Sunday. We're going to try it and see what happens.
I will build this world from love. La da da, la da da, la da da da. Will you build this world from love? La da da, la da da, la da da da. And if we build this world from love, la da da, la da da, la da da da, then God will build this world from love. La da da, la da da, la da da da. I will build this world from love. La da da, la da da, la da da da. Will you build this world from love? La da da, la da da, la da da da. And if we build this world from love, la da da, la da da, la da da da, then God will build this world from love. La da da, la da da, la da da da. I will build this world from love. La da da, la da da, la da da da. Will you build this world from love? La da da, la da da, la da da da. And if we build this world from love, la da da, la da da, la da da da, then God will build this world from love. La da da, la da da, la da da da.
Good morning. Good morning, people who have braved the fog to come to church today. We appreciate it. Welcome to Common Thread Church, and welcome to Contemplative Sunday. And, of course, a special welcome to all newcomers, whether you've been coming for months or only for a few weeks. If you are here, you belong with us. And because we are a church that seeks to find support in questions instead of the answers in this spiritual life, you are our life's blood because you keep us practiced in the art of welcoming the stranger. If you would like to receive our welcome email, please use the link or the QR code, and it will give you everything you need to make your way into our community. Though I think, as I said last week, a much more straightforward and simpler path would be to walk up to somebody who looks friendly, introduce yourself as a newcomer, and ask how one makes one's way into our community. That also works. We are also a community that believes this spiritual journey that we are on requires mutual support and companionship. So if you could use some of that these days, particularly given the period that we are in between the weather and the politics and the fog, please reach out or just find the library down the hall after the service. Each week there is a listener posted in the library who has completed our self-awareness training. Some of you are likely signed up for the self-awareness retreat that's coming up in early November. Could you put a hand up if you in fact are? Just for a little advertisement for that. Thank you. So we have this thing called a self-awareness worksheet. We have these listeners who have completed trainings. So if you did feel the need to find your way down to that library after the service, what you would experience is either the opportunity to do a worksheet with someone, to be offered the worksheet with a little bit of an explanation, or just to sit and to talk with someone. So today, the person who will be the listener is not here yet because of the fog. So I'm sure it will all work itself out. There's a little bit of fog. Again, welcome. We're so glad to be together. Good morning, Selah. Good to see you. And let us affirm, as we do each week, the nature of our commitment to one another. If you are here, you belong. We are, every one of us, carriers of the inner light. We are, every one of us, carriers of divine breath. Good. So I invite you to stand, to greet one another, and to pass the peace.
If you are joining us online, then you've heard this invitation before. Maybe today's the day you're going to take us up on it. It's an invitation to connect, even though you are online in an in-person, on Zoom kind of way. It's an invitation to have some real-life interaction. And here's what we found. Show up for an online What Are You Thinking after the lesson, or participate in an online life story group, as you're going to hear about later today, or join an online book club or an Enneagram group. And online becomes a space where we can, and we've done it, build authentic spiritual friendships. So that's why every week I'm here inviting you to click on one of those two links, and you'll hear after the lesson today, here's a join a life story group link. Other times you'll hear book club or some of the other things I mentioned. Now, we are not unaware the resistance that our invitation evokes. It is hard to click that link because you don't know us, you don't know what we want from you. And here's the thing, we do want something from you. But what we want, you might want too. We want to build healthy spiritual community in an online way. So I hope you'll take the risk. I hope you'll help us build healthy spiritual community in an online way. You can click one of the links in the YouTube notes later on. You'll hear the invitation, and I hope you do it. Anyway, let's get back to the service.
Sue, is the meditation next? Is that what's getting ready to start, or no? You'll tell me. Okay. Okay.
Good morning. Good morning, friends. Is my mic on? Is it on? Great. Good morning, friends. Welcome again to Contemplative Sunday, where we're working with voices, the harmonium, and some hand drums without Joe's leadership today. He's taking a well-deserved Sunday off, and we're trying some different things on for size while working with a chant that's become familiar to many of us over the past few months, and that might take on a little extra meaning for those of us who are participating in the Tuesday evening Lectio Divina practices from the Gospel of Thomas. Because this line, as you might recall, whoops, not that one, that one, that we'll be chanting this morning is from that text, from the Gospel of Thomas. Come to know the one in the presence before you, and everything hidden, all will be revealed. Now, if you are involved with this Tuesday practice, you might get a sense for how best to engage with this text as words that you allow to sink into your heart and work in you. As we repeatedly chant the words together, as we create a vibrational energy together, the words might sink in deeper, and perhaps they can help reveal something to us about ourselves and something to us about the divine. So Melissa will lead us in this, then we'll chant it through 3 times. And then we'll pass around the mic to see if you want to share what might come up for you in this practice, or to share whatever might be on your heart this morning. And there might be a few things on our hearts this morning, after which we'll chant it again one more time. So first, I'm going to lead us in a little grounding meditation. And I encourage us all to just be open to seeing what arises in our communal practice, in our understanding, and in our hearts. So to begin, I invite you to get comfortable. Just close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Inhale and exhale. Just keep breathing slowly with intention. Relax your face muscles and stack your spine. Bring awareness to your feet and feel them grounding you. Go ahead and deepen your breathing. See if you can draw your mind down into your heart. See that warm, radiant, glowing light expanding and contracting with each heartbeat. And in this silence, see the light extending beyond your body. As we prepare to chant as our contemplative practice. With this light that is connecting with the expanding and contracting light emanating from the hearts of the people beside you, of the ones in the presence before you, as you come to know the one in the presence before you.
Come to know the one in the presence before you, and everything hidden, all will be revealed. Come to know the one in the presence before you, and everything hidden, all will be revealed. Come to know the one in the presence before you, and everything hidden, all will be revealed. Come to know the one in the presence before you, and everything hidden, all will be revealed. Come to know the one in the presence before you, and everything hidden, all will be revealed. Come to know the one in the presence before you, and everything hidden, all will be revealed.
Now I would like to invite anyone who has anything on their hearts this morning to share them. I'll bring around a different mic. Thank you. I know What's on my heart this morning are all of our friends in Western North Carolina, especially those who are in our community or loved by those in our community. I know Cindy is out there. I know Susan Joyner's father is out there. My brother-in-law is out there. If there's anyone out there in your life who you'd like us to hold in our hearts very specifically, feel free to mention them. Just know that we're holding all of them in our hearts.
My mother and I have a difficult relationship, and a few weeks ago I had to go down there, and she did what she always does and was unkind, and for the first time in 50 years I was able to not respond because of endless 24/7 spiritual practices. And the hurricane went through Augusta, Georgia, where she lives, and a lot of her property has been destroyed. But on the same day it happened, I received a letter from her with an apology, the very first apology I've ever gotten in my entire life. And it was, as the religious tradition says, a result of my being able to not be reactive. And thank God it happened, because now she really needs help, because she's 80 and the house is a wreck. And so she's able to ask for help. So this apparently is how the universe has moved. So thank you for that, universe.
My daughter just, she was riding her bike, Everly, and she fell off her bike and skinned her knee. And she walked back home and she was crying. She had that typical, like, I didn't want to have to walk all the way back. I just wanted to have an injury. I didn't want to, like, suffer the walk back. And so she was pretty worked up when she got back. And I'm like, okay, well, we got to wash this off and got to clean out the wound and all this stuff. And she would, when she would like put her knee under the water or whatever, she would cry out, like really like intensely. And I was like, what's going on? And she was just like, I just need to cry right now. That's what feels good, is just crying right now. And it's helping. And yeah, I don't know. There's something really beautiful about that to me, and I think something I'll be thinking about for a while.
Know the one in the presence before you, and everything hidden, all will be revealed. Come to know the one in the presence before you. Everything hidden, all will be revealed.
Something's a little sticky with this clicker this morning. I'm sorry, I keep jumping ahead to the next slide, so it's not a surprise for you. Anyhow, we have a few announcements this morning. After the service, we'll have What Are You Thinking on Zoom and Life Story Group Formation here in the room after the lesson. We'll also post the link for those of you who are remote to get into the Life Story Group Formation action. So look for that. After the service, our new meditation support group will meet downstairs in the new contemplative room, which is just to the right at the bottom of the stairs. On Tuesday evening, join us for virtual Lectio Divina. Next Saturday, we'll have another contemplative practice, intuitive painting, downstairs in the teen room. And after church next Sunday, we'll do our Enneagram group formation, then head to the Art Museum for our annual church picnic. Remember to pack your lunch. Okay, so I am pleased that we have so many contemplative offerings this fall. The online Zoom meditation every morning, the meditation support group that begins today, the Lectio Divina practice on Tuesday evenings, and not this Tuesday, but next Tuesday, we'll be hosting one of these offerings live here in the chapel, or perhaps in our new contemplative room. We'll just kind of see what sort of turnout we get. And we kind of beta tested this last month, and it was lovely. And it would be even lovelier if we had a few more folks joining us. An hour of beautiful chant and meditation in a beautiful setting for the good of our souls and the good of the world. Join us if you can. And speaking of the good of the world and for the good of Wake County, come out on Thursday night to Watts Chapel Missionary Baptist Church to show up in force and meet the candidates for local office who are vying to represent us on important issues such as affordable housing. And I'm not sure, is there an online option for this too, Doug?
There is, but in this one, we do better if we're there in person.
Okay, so this is the one. If you're going to show up for anyone, show up for this one. Register. You can register. No, there's not a link here. I think if you go to the website, you can register. Just make sure you mention you're with Common Thread, and let's make a difference in our local community if we can. And if you missed anything I just ran through, you can learn more in one of 3 places: in the app, on the website, or in the weekly email. So I was speaking with Carol the other day, and if you know Carol, she's one of our angels here at Common Thread. As our hospitality guru, she will bring you food if you're sick. She will take a walk with you if you need to talk. She ensures we have coffee here every morning. She also just took over the bookkeeping duties around here. So much of what she does is unsung and behind the scenes, and we wouldn't be who we are without her. But the number one thing she does is make sure that people here know that they are loved and are taken care of when they need taken care of. And Morgan, our community care coordinator, is another one of our angels. She is the one who gets the process going if you're having a hard time and you need some support. And she does more than that. If you identify as female and use that bathroom down the hall this morning, you'll notice there is no longer wallpaper peeling off the walls, thanks to Morgan. If you check out the new contemplative room, you'll see Morgan's labors reflected in how quickly we were able to move down there. And if we need something done around here, she gets it done before we even know it happened. And I could go on and on about all the good work that so many people do around here. But I mentioned these 2 friends of mine in particular because each one of them right now is going through the kind of life situation that, were anyone else experiencing it, they'd be the first to respond with deep love and care. Being community means being the kind of community that holds each other up when we are in need, when we are hurting, and when we are depleted. So we could use a few more folks on our community care team, people who are part of a coordinated effort to being available for others in our community when they are actively looking for support. So whether it's organizing a meal train after surgery, providing some companionship in a lonely time, or simply being a point of contact who can point someone in the right direction if they need it, we could use your help. And of course, this happens all the time in our community without a team or a process. Caring for each other is the most core of our core values. But as a church community, we don't want people to have any question about where they can turn to for support when they need it. And we don't want to have any doubts that we have enough people upon whom we can call so that no one person is stretched beyond their own capacity to help. So if you feel called to learn more, just grab me or Carol after church to let us know. I don't think Morgan is here, but if you ever see Morgan, you can grab her too. Or send us a message. We're all on the app and on the website. Because when enough of us come together to offer our love and our care to each other, love and care that we all will need at some point in our lives, we can hold it all together, and that's being community at its finest. And now Shelby is going to come up to give us our monthly kids update. Should I use that microphone? Which mic should we use, Jean? For Shelby? This one's fine for this, okay. We just can't walk it around the room. Okay.
Am I supposed to stand on that piece of tape? Okay, great. All right, hi, good morning.
All right. So you can see my bajillion notes. I have too many things to say, so I'll try not to. I just want to share with you guys a few moments from September, some stuff that's going on downstairs, some things that are coming up for October, and all of that. But I'll start by saying I'm glad for the people who shared this morning because, like Everly, man, I know that feel. He's talking about Jack, and like Jack's talking about she just needed to cry. I'm like, I totally know that feel, and I am finally not embarrassed as an adult about it. You cry, and I'm going to cry with you, and it's totally fine. And hopefully this is the kind of place where you feel comfortable doing that too, and especially our kids. So some moments from December, our virtue was discipline, which does not mean punishment. It means self-control and persistence and being in charge of our bodies and words. In this last month, I have seen kids running into the room to hug a friend. I have seen children, without naming names or specifics, overcoming very specific fears, which I think is super cool. I have seen the world's biggest introvert adult who got voluntold to help downstairs have a ton of fun and want to come back and do it. I may or may not be married to that person. But he had fun, and he wants to come back and do it. So I have seen many hands make light work at our cleanup day. That is always super, super beneficial, and I'm very grateful for it. I've seen children with a whole spectrum of interests and energy levels cause the most beautiful chaos. And I think that's perfect. I love the exposure to every different type of energy in our room. I have seen the shy kids play and no longer be shy, making friends. And specifically in our space, I've seen people just volunteer their own time, even outside of our cleanup day, to come down and help move things around and organize. Our space is consistently transforming down there, and I'm glad that now that the meditation room is down there, you'll be able to see a little bit more if you haven't visited us. I recently met with somebody who hadn't been downstairs yet, and I was like, come around, let's see. So please come check us out, see what we got going on. And we do have an office down there that we're consistently trying to transform also. So when you're going down for meditations, if you need to have a private conversation, our office is open. Downstairs. Not Doug's office, is the one next to it. So if you see a treadmill, you went in the wrong one. We do have a classroom wish list now, so that is downstairs. So some of our hopes for October are one, that you would check us out and get to know what we do, because I still hear a lot that people don't fully understand what we do downstairs. So I can give you a rundown of our basic schedule or some of the things that we do, share resources. And our theme will be flexibility, which is kind of a broad word. So what that's meaning is rethinking things, okay? Like having flexible thinking about situations and about people. Having creative expression, thinking, what more can I do with this? Adaptability in relationships, and we'll just spend the last week in October just doing fun fall stuff up there, or down there. Let me see. At the church picnic, I'm also going to bring some pumpkins and some fun things, so we'll just have some fun with the kids, or if you feel like you need to do some fun activities and let your inner child play, then come on down and do that also. I think that's it. Okay, come ask me questions too. Come visit, say hi.
Good morning. An update on the state of discombobulation in my life. My house is more chaotic than it was last week, but that's a good sign, because we've actually had people in there tearing things out so that they could put things in. Still socks. I had to get up at 5 in the morning so that I had socks, because I was in the wrong part of town and I didn't have socks there, so I went, so it's happening. Before we begin, Let me tell you about the 13th. On the 13th, which is what, 2 Sundays from now, I'm going to do a newcomer class. If you haven't ever been to one of them, I'd encourage you to come. We're going to talk about the history of Common Thread, the norms and practices that have emerged along the way. It'll be online as well as in person. It's going to be in the conference room, which is the first door to the left there. So if you're online and your time shifting and you hear this later in the week, maybe on the 13th you could come live and then Zoom in right afterwards, and we got this spiffy new hybrid room in there, so we'll do that. Okay, last week I suggested that this lesson would be better thought of as a user's guide for writing a user's guide for deconstructing and reconstructing religion, because it's more of a set of principles about how to form a reimagined religious setting, a religious practice, than it is about the actual things that we do. So, in both the lesson last week as well as what are you thinking afterwards, it came up that before we can reimagine religion, we need to be sure that we can define it in our own minds. What do we mean when we're talking about it? Because for a lot of people, the word religion itself makes the whole endeavor a non-starter. I listed a bunch of reasons, and you already know those reasons. But I suggested that given that human beings are spiritual, and given that human beings are communal, if we could find a way to be spiritual together, to practice collectively, and do it in a way that is not ugly and not divisive and not exclusive, we could find something beautiful. Now, we need to be careful not to fool ourselves, because there's a whole lot of ugly that has latched itself onto religion, and reimagining, consequently, is not going to be easy. But to leave a healthy legacy, a roadmap for our children, I called it laying track a couple of weeks ago, it's going to require of us rethinking at the most fundamental level, reimagining, and some reclaiming. So, this lesson is some core principles for reimagining, some core principles for a user's guide, for writing a user's guide for deconstructing and reconstructing religion. I suggested last week that part of religion's problem has been that we have been playing the wrong game, and we've been playing it in the wrong arena. We've been playing the game of the scientist and the journalist. We have not been playing the game of the poet or the storyteller. A religion that will be sustainable for our children and grandchildren, I suggested, is going to be more poetry than it is going to be prose. It's going to be more about magical than it is going to be about orthodoxy. Now that word magical, it's kind of weird, so here's what I'm talking about when I use the term. There are two different ways that human beings can talk about, there are two different ways that human beings can experience falling in love. The first way involves inquiry and data and findings, research, analysis. It's a very important way. If we approach the experience of falling in love that way, we're going to focus on perhaps oxytocin and bonding, dopamine and reward, endorphins and attachment, vasopressin and commitment, testosterone and desire, attachment theory, the stability of the offspring, all of which is very important, all of which deepens our understanding of this very profound human experience. But when falling in love happens to us, we experience something else, something that is not best described in that language, something that is not best experienced that way. It is another and also important way of experiencing our humanity. And when we experience that, we need poetry or music or imagination or emotion or passion or space for mystery. So that's the magical that I'm talking about. That's the game played in that arena that religion could be playing. But unfortunately, because in our society, the language of, the thinking of the scientist and the journalist are everywhere, religious folks have fallen prey to forgetting the game we play, forgetting the arena we play it in. So I suggested last week a good place for us to start would be restoring uncertainty. Restoring uncertainty to religion. Because as we saw last week, it turns out that certitude and the quest for certitude often hinders our experience of the magical parts. I put up a list last week, experiences that are better sought with a posture of uncertainty, experiences that are better sought with the language of imagination, better pursued with emotion and passion and mystery than with the breaking down to data. So that's last week's lesson in broad strokes. And then during, what are you thinking afterwards? Whoa, Doug. You say religion could be that way. You say that there's a long heritage of religion being that way. But if that's true, well, then what the hell? Have you looked around? Doug, I think you're pipe dreaming here. Morgan brought up this grand vision of yours. It is not what I have experienced in religion. What I've experienced is very clear demarcating boundary lines. I have experienced in religion very clear lines that tell me who is in and who is out. And often people who are very dear to me are out. So yeah, preacher man, your pretty words, I think you're making this shit up. Now, nobody said it that way. Everybody was very nice, but that's how I said it on my journey a long, long time ago. But here's what I've discovered since. There's always been somewhere a spiritual community that consistently throughout history keeps finding its way back to religion as poetry. There are always in backwaters and quiet spaces spiritual communities that experience religion as a finger pointing at the moon, pointing toward experience rather than focused on the religion itself. We don't have to make this stuff up because there's a very well-worn path that's already been laid for us. All we need to do is just go back into our history and understand what those people were after. A beautiful way of being spiritual, a beautiful way of being communal starts with this fundamental notion in place: restoring uncertainty, then practicing uncertainty. We start this kind of reimagined religion by getting more comfortable with ambiguity, getting more curious and more open, less right, and less closed down. And again, there have always been backwaters and enclaves where religion started there with humility, with less focus on getting the answers right, and approaching life, and especially spiritual life, with more deference and uncertainty. There have always been expressions of religion that hold belief more lightly, that are more open to the quest for growth and the quest for change, finding truth in places we had not considered. Once our starting point is not figuring it all out and pinning it all down, we start to see that on the spiritual journey, experience is more the point, magical, life-changing experience. It turns out that organizing ourselves around figuring it all out and pinning it all down and trying to jam something that is mysterious into a set of manageable beliefs, it reduces us as human beings, and it reduces our religion into ruts that become thoughts that we have thought before, feelings that we have felt before, words we have said before, and deeds that we have done before. But once we start with ambiguity, once we start with uncertainty, we become more free to explore more broadly. Also, if we reimagine a religion that begins with uncertainty, it becomes more possible to move beyond the boundaries that Morgan brought up and objected to last week. If we are uncertain if we are more comfortable with the unknown, it weakens those instincts that get very strong inside of us that there is an us and we are right, and there is a them and they are wrong. Once we lose some of that certitude, some of that certainty, we are more capable of not living in the us versus them construct. Because, hey, I might not have the whole picture. What have you got? I might not have the whole picture. What are you experiencing that I am not? It also opens the possibility of the experience that we can be more interconnected than we actually feel we are. A religion that's better able to handle ambiguity can dismantle the instincts that drive the us versus them, and can make us more curious about what others have experienced that we have not, make us more curious and more respectful of other traditions and their ways of being. We can become more compassionate when we start with uncertitude. We can become more open to connection. We can be more open to deeper experience of love and acceptance and empathy when we don't have the confidence that we are right and they are wrong. And that kind of religion could dismantle the human need, the religious need to assert or to dominate or to prove or to compete. That kind of religion could dismantle the human need, the religious need to fear and then to judge from our fear. So section 1 of this user's guide for writing a user's guide for restoring religion would be restoring uncertainty. Section 2 then would become practicing uncertainty. According to Pew Research Center, about 45% of Americans report having had some kind of an experience that they sometimes call spiritual or they sometimes call mystical. Now, skeptics, and I'm often think skeptical thoughts, will often focus on the stories that these people tell about their experiences. My thoughts go there. I bet when you hear one of those stories, your thoughts might go there as well. But I have come to think over time that maybe it's better to focus less on the story that people tell about their experiences and more about the magical quality and how it impacts people to have these kinds of experiences. I've had a few of them in my life, and sure enough, as the years have gone by, as I have grown, as I have learned, the story I tell myself about those experiences, that story has fundamentally changed. But the impact of the experience has not changed, actually has grown over time. So when I describe my experiences, I use the term semi-mystical. Semi, because both of these ways of describing human experience seem to work. It's completely valid to think of these experiences as this is what brains do. This is why brains do that. This is the stimuli. This is the response. Perfectly legitimate way to think about these experiences. It is also valid to think about these experiences in a little more magical than that kind of way. After two of these experiences that I remember, if we had more time, I would tell them to you. I had a secondary experience, an immediate and non-voluntary response. And that was the right thing to do in this moment, after having had this eye-opening experience, is to get quiet, to be silent, to be still. Now that was telling in my experience because in all of those enclaves and backwaters that I mentioned where we've held on to uncertitude religion, the places we've done that, always in the mix in those contexts has been the cultivation of silence and the cultivation of stillness, the cultivation of an inner space of quietness. When I first started meditating, I read this book, Open Mind, Open Heart. It was written by a Trappist monk who taught about meditation. And I read the book at the beginning of my religious unraveling. It was the late 80s or the early 90s, and who knows if it was the unraveling of my religion that led me to meditation, or if it was meditation that led me to my great religious unraveling. But in the book, there's a quote. And when I read the quote then, 30, 40 years ago, it rang true, and the echoes of that ringing still bounce around inside of me. The quote was, God's first language is silence, and everything else is translation. I found out later that Keating had adapted that quote from the poet Rumi. Silence is the language of God. All else is poor translation. When we reimagine religion, and when we start with uncertitude, when we start with ambiguity, when our starting place is uncertainty rather than the quest for certainty, silence and solitude and inner quiet and inner stillness are always in the mix. The kind of experiences that I've been describing, that I would describe as magical experiences, we find them more often when we let go of our preconceived notions. When we let go of our high degree of confidence that we have about this perceived notion or that I am right, or I've got this thing right, when we let go of this doctrine or that dogma, when we let go of those things, we become more likely to move into awe or grace or some of these experiences that I've listed. When we make religion or cast religion in the language of poetry, when we cast it as a finger pointing at the moon, uncertainty religion is going to become more about letting go than it's going to become about holding on. And one of the primary ways we let go is we get quiet. Now, if this was the actual user manual, I would talk about the things that Sue mentioned earlier. The 6:30 meditation or the contemplative retreat, or I just saw Angela's starting the thing today, or our 4 core contemplative practices, mindfulness and welcome, examine, and loving kindness. We'd talk about how important it is to be out in nature, because in nature, stillness is easier to access. We'd talk about practical practices that we can practice, that if we do practice, will actually make the noisy chatter that comes with the ego self get quieter and quieter and quieter and quieter. The ego self that has to cast the world in right and wrong, good and bad, gets quieter and quieter and quieter and quieter. That constant chatter that goes on our brains, that most of our waking hours is defending that we are right and that they are wrong, or defending that we are us and they are them. All that chatter that goes with the ego that constructs itself to belong, all that gets quieter and quieter and quieter. Because practice silence, practice inner stillness, practice quieting the inner noise of the chattering ego, and we just do start to notice the world differently. And one of the things that we do start to notice is that the boundaries that we set, the boundaries between you and me, between us and them, between self and all the other things, those boundaries are a lot more porous than we have been led to believe. So at the center of practicing uncertainty religion is the practice of inner stillness, the practice of quieting noisy ego chatter. Here's a second core principle of practice: deep listening. Just as when we cultivate inner quiet, when we listen deeply, we also quiet the chattering ego self. Deep listening is an exercise in learning to stay here and now in the presence of those around us. It's an exercise in not crafting a response while someone else is speaking. It's an exercise in listening to understand rather than listening to respond. It's a practicing that actually is predicated on the notion that we are, every one of us, carriers of the indwelling divine. So when we practice deep listening, what we're listening for is something magical that exists in the deepest part of the other. And sure enough, practice deep listening for long enough, and there just does develop inside of us more empathy, more understanding. The barricades that separate us one from another begin to start dissolving, becoming more porous. We may not even realize that we're in the pursuit of the inner divine that is in the other. We just notice that these kinds of things happen when we listen more deeply and listen more consistently. So deep listening is about hearing others, but it's also about more than hearing others. It's about opening our hearts and opening our minds in a way that we can practice in the daily moments of our lives that will help us enter into the experience of the other in a deeper way, expecting that we just might find the divine light that we all carry, that we just might find a unique expression of truth and beauty in the other. Now, admittedly, sometimes the light that we all carry is very cleverly hidden. It is in me. I suspect it is in you too. But when our starting expectation is ambiguity, that we are both light and darkness, we don't just focus on the one. When we realize that we are both fear and courage, we are both hope and despair, we are both vice and virtue, what deep listening does is begin to look for that which is also present, that is born of the inner light that we all carry. And we do that when ambiguity is our starting point. We do that when uncertainty is our starting point. We learn to listen deeply. And we are more likely to see the sacred that is in one another, more likely to see our already present connection one to another. We're more likely to see that the walls that divide us from one another are, at best, porous. So, here's a way we could reimagine. In all those spaces, through all those generations where we have, even in our own tradition as well as other traditions, held on to the uncertainty way of being religious. This kind of deep listening that I'm describing, those communities framed that kind of deep listening as prayer. What do you know about that? That kind of deep listening, those communities understood as prayer. Because being fully present to another awakens us to the divine that is within us and the divine that is within the other. And that is the very embodiment of prayer. The deep within calling to the deep within. We begin to realize that deep listening is a form of prayer. So when we sit with someone and we listen without any sense of our responding to, especially when they're going through difficult times, especially when they're going through painful times, especially when they're going through confusing times, and we don't respond with the ego habit of advice, we don't respond with the ego habit of solutions, but we simply embody love and compassion in our presence in the divine, in a right here, right now, present to the moment way. Prayer. Offering another full attention is a spiritual practice. Deep listening and offering another full attention is a religious practice. It is a prayer practice. Way back when I was starting Common Thread, people used to laugh at me because I asked a question you've probably heard me ask: how's your soul? Some folks laughed because it was an unusual question. Back then it was. Now it's kind of a normalized question here in our community. But others laughed because it was some people laughed because it was unusual. Others laughed because it's a little bit of a disconcerting question. There was another little bit of drama going on. Back in the day, there was a whole bunch of arguments going on among the religious folks about how we are right about the nature of human beings. Are we a soul or are we a spirit? And what's the difference? And let's argue about that. And so some people thought I was evoking a theological debate. Others thought the question was just too damn personal. Don't be asking me that, preacher man. But what I was after was, let's talk about a part of you and a part of me that we don't usually talk about. Because when we do that, we create a space between us in which we can practice prayer, in which we can practice deep listening, in which we can give one another the gift that deep listening brings to each other. So, a couple of principles on which to found the practices for deconstructing and reconstructing religion. Cultivate inner quiet, cultivate deep listening. Two important principles. If we had more time, I would talk about how deep learning is also a practice of letting go. Because learning will always make a demand of change upon us. And when we let go of those already preconceived notions in order to adapt to what we are learning, we would also talk about how serving something greater than ourselves, laying down our human preoccupation with self to serve another, to serve something bigger than ego, also a practice in letting go. But here's what I hope is the take-home message for this lesson. To reimagine, redeem, restore religion, we're going to need to have a starting place of uncertainty. We're going to have an internal capacity to tolerate ambiguity. But if we do, it is an invitation to undertake a journey of liberation, to be liberated from our locked-in-place thoughts, to be liberated from our locked-in-place assumptions, to be liberated from our I am sure that I am right and they are wrong way of thinking, feeling, and being. If we embrace a religion that starts with uncertainty, we open ourselves to the possibility of deeper growth and deeper connection and deeper experience. Now, it's going to require practice, but that actually is what religious communities are for, to help us help one another be steady in our practice. And that is when we'll use these principles to actually write the user's guide for deconstructing instead of the user's guide for writing the user's guide. So in Dwelling Divine, may we as a community, as individuals and collectively, may we embrace uncertainty. And may we build a way of being spiritual community together that helps us become the better people building a better world that we all desire to be. May that be so in us, through us, among us. Amen. Okay, online folks, let me talk to you for just a moment. Usually at this point, we open the floor here in the room for what are you thinking? We're going to do that, but it's going to do it very shortly in just a moment. But today we're going to do something else during our time, and I'm going to encourage you to do something similar. We're going to invite one another in a moment to form life story groups. What I said in the lesson about deep listening, this is one of the best places that we know to get that process started. So you've heard us talk about 4 ways of belonging. You can have public belonging, you can have social belonging, personal belonging, and deep belonging. When we talk about deep belonging, this is our best attempt to create the spaces for the deep listening that we talked about this morning. It's a space, we describe it very specifically, say, this is the place where we get together on purpose to talk about our shit. And after we do, know that we will still belong in the community and know that we will still belong with the group that we've discussed that with. But since that's not a social norm in our world, there are other ways of belonging that help us build up to that kind of community. And one of the best ways that we know to do that is with life story groups. They're very simple. 3 or 4 people meet 3 or 4 times. Each time, someone tells the story of their life. Everybody always gets the option to sanitize their story as much as they want to, but we have found that it's a whole lot more fun if we are as transparent as we are comfortable being, and we have found that when a critical mass of us in the community do life story groups, it changes the nature of our community, because life story groups engender trust and affection. And when trust and affection pepper a community, it changes the nature of the community. We begin to feel more comfortable taking bigger risks with one another, and we move our lives forward. So online folks, 2 places you can go to participate in this. If you go to the website on the front page and scroll down, you're going to see life story groups. Click that, it'll take you to a form. If you don't want to do that, you can go to our app. Right there on the front page, there's a link. Click that, it'll take you to the same form. And this is open enrollment week. Starting today and going through to next Sunday, we're going to allow you to fill in those forms. So if you are time shifting right now, that's okay. You've got a week. Go there and click on the link, and we will connect you to people who will do this kind of group with you. Now, if you're in the room, we're going to do the same thing, but once we dismiss the live stream, folks, we're going to form groups in an in-person kind of way. So if you would like to, even if you're in the room, participate on Zoom, do what the online folks are doing. You know, go to the forum and someone will take you there. So if you stay in the group right now and form the way we're going to do it here in the room, don't fill in a form. All right? So again, all you got to do, online folks, go to the website, go to the app. And when you do, where's Kate? Kate, remind me, let's send that online video that I did on how to do that when people enroll. So. Okay, great. So right on the forum, you will see an online video. I think it's 7 or 8 minutes on this is how we do life story groups. You could probably figure it out without the video, but the video's there to help. Okay, let's dismiss the live stream, folks. If you would, please put your hand on your heart, and let's remember that we are, every one of us, carriers of the indwelling divine. The inner light is within each of us: love and joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness. And if you would, extend your other hand to our city. And let's look for opportunities this week to share what's already in us with the people with whom we live and work and go to school, looking for opportunities to repair and heal our worlds. Amen. God bless you all on the live stream. Please do go join into a life story group. Oh yeah, did you already